On this episode, we are still celebrating my favorite film of all time, Jaws, and its influence on the film world. It was such a hit that, of course, a huge string of imitators followed, and we're going to be doing 2 videos about those knockoffs. Now, this week's videos are 10 Jaws knockoffs, and all of them feature sharks or variations of sharks. And what are the chances that they could match the original? It's 100 to 1, Martin. 100 to 1.
Number 10. I feel like it's always tradition to include in these ripoff videos a foreign language bizarre remake, and I actually have a few here, including Call, otherwise known as Turkish Jaws. Now, this movie is referred to as Turkish Jaws, but the movie itself has little in common with American Jaws. There's seriously just a 2-minute scene in the middle featuring the film's hero stuck in the middle of the ocean and attacked by a hilarious shark that looks like one of those little coin-operated things you would ride outside of a Kmart. There's also the Brazilian BACALHAU, which translates to cod, which was a Portuguese parody of sorts. Without speaking the language, it appears to follow the same basic plot structure with sort of a comedic bent, and the whole thing can be found on YouTube if you want to check it out. Finally, there's the 1996 AATANK from India, and I really hope there's musical numbers.
Please let there be musical numbers!
This is the most well put together of the 3 here, with a coastal fishing village beset upon by a killer shark, and musical number, there we are! There are actually several songs until we get some shark action, and awesomely, our first on-screen attack occurs mid-singing. As this swimming woman is eaten while her drunk partner passes out on the sand. Again, tough to really figure out without language assistance, but the ending face-off is something to be seen, that's for sure. I mean, look at this! And then this.
This transcends language.
Number 9. Coming out in 1976, just 1 year after the release of Spielberg's masterpiece, comes MAKO, The Jaws of Death, which actually doesn't have a ton in common with the film it's ripping off plot-wise, but would not exist without it. Apparently, director William Grefé wrote it before Jaws came out, but couldn't get it made until afterwards, when everyone and their brother was dying to put out their own shark movie. You can tell from this poster that they were trying to create parallels between the two, and even the inclusion of the word Jaws in the title was clearly to create a bit of connection between the 2 films. It was apparently also titled Killer Jaws, so again, they wanted to make people think that these 2 films were similar, and it's kinda disappointing because they really aren't. This one is actually about Sonny here, who has this magic medallion that allows him to have a connection to sharks and goes out and kills people who would seek to harm them. So yeah, nothing like Jaws except for the inclusion of sharks. I should emphasize that Sonny talks to sharks, and I guess they can understand him or not. It's kind of up in the air whether that whole medallion thing is even real. But you see, Sonny is also a member of a Filipino shark clan, which is about as far from Jaws as you can get, but they still tried to market it that way, I guess. So when watching this one, understand that you may not be getting a similar product to Jaws, but you are getting one of the very first to cash in on its popularity. This one is especially weird because near the end, as Sonny gets blamed for the death of a woman who is doing a swim routine in a tank with a shark that they've billed as a man-eating shark, and after it eats her, the town gets in a tizzy and comes after Sonny. How would they think that he had anything to do with it? It's a woman in a tank with a man-eating shark who gets eaten by the man-eating shark. Why would they blame Sonny? Number 8. Just 2 years after Jaws, another clone arrived with Tintorera, Killer Shark, in 1977. Tintorera is Spanish for tiger shark.
A what?
So they're distinguishing themselves from Jaws a bit, although it starts with slow shots through a reef, following a shark looking pretty familiar. Although it takes place at a resort, there's not a lot of similarities to Jaws on the surface, but anytime they get into the water, it gets pretty rip-offy. Like a scene where a girl goes skinny dipping in the ocean while her boyfriend sleeps and gets eaten. Most of the storyline involves this weird kind of bromance/rivalry between Miguel and Steven here, and there's some apparently real violence to the animals here, so if you're squeamish about that kind of stuff, I'd avoid this one. The whole middle of this film is the weird love triangle in which Miggs and Steve form a mutual relationship with Gabriella here, and it seems to work for a while. I mean, the three of them get married, and there's a higher than expected amount of male and female nudity going on here, and a lower than expected amount of tiger shark action. The plot takes some unusual turns, and since about 80% of this movie is about threesomes, it's no surprise that Terry shows up for some Three's Company action, and all the wildest shark stuff pretty much occurs in the last 10 minutes or so, and I should note that all of the shark stuff here is done with live sharks and actors, and it's only at the very end that anyone even questions why the beaches weren't closed if they knew that there was a killer shark around.
It's, interesting.
The Jaws comparisons are there, but it's not a blatant ripoff, and ultimately it feels like the shark plotline is just a side story. Number 7. So this one's cheating a bit because I guess it's not technically a shark, but it's a cheat I'm going to use more than once because this movie from 1984 is called Monster Shark. So there.
It's a shark.
This one was also known as Devilfish, Monster from the Red Ocean, and Shark Red in the Ocean, and was directed by John Old Jr., which was actually a pseudonym for the great Lamberto Bava. This one has a massive shark off the coast of Florida attacking and eating people, but there's some wild subplots like the genetics lab and mob killings, and it's theorized that the creature is actually a form of prehistoric shark, but let's face it, the second that I said genetics lab, you knew what was up. When you sort of get to see it, it's a hybrid shark-octopus thing with massive tentacles like some sort of precursor to Sharktopus, and they discover that it's only 8 months old, so still growing. The further this one goes, the less Jaws-like it becomes, and oddly, even though it was made almost 10 years after Jaws, it looks like it was shot like right afterwards, which is kind of a thing with 80s Italian films. Number 6. Italy is the land of the blockbuster knockoffs, and Jaws was not different, leading way to 1990's Deep Blood, which is credited to director Ralph Donato, but he apparently only directed the opening scene, and the rest of the film was from the mighty Joe D'Amato. Early on in this one, we see that something is eating people off the coast, while this kid just watches.
I mean, does he look like... Does he kind of look happy about it?
He does not look concerned, that's for sure. When one of a group of friends is eaten while his friend also just kind of stands there, looking on, because that's apparently a theme in this movie, and we get our Jaws influences here as they catch a shark that they claim is the killer shark, but of course, they're wrong. We know they're wrong because the killer shark had a black fin, but this one has gray fins, which we know because they do close-ups of every single one of its fins. Mickey here is sort of our main character and has a really volatile personality.
I hate you, man! I hate you with all my heart and all my soul. I wish you had got eaten by that shark. I'm sorry, Dad.
The boys all team up to try to take out the shark, and man, it takes them forever to really do anything. Nothing really happens at all until the last 15 minutes of this movie, and it may just be the dullest one in the bunch. There's a few random shots of a mechanical shark head, but pretty much everything is just stock footage of sharks that you've probably already seen, well, in other movies in this list. Everyone's wearing some really cool shorts, though. Number 5. Oddly enough, one of the very first Jaws ripoffs never reached the silver screen and instead was a made-for-television movie called Shark Kill from 1976. This one takes place on an oil rig, and we have our Brody analog here, and he spots a great white sniffing around, but of course, no one believes him. Instead of closing the beach, they refuse to shut down operations on the rig, and of course attacks happen. Very similar to Jaws, they offer up a bounty for the shark, so a bunch of fishermen head out to the ocean to compete for it. The scene is really similar, with boats almost capsizing each other while we follow our two heroes. They rent their boat from an old Quinty kind of guy, and of course they end up stuck at sea when their boat malfunctions because, hey, that is the formula. But then I guess you can say it gave open water a bit of inspiration there when somehow they don't notice this huge boat with a party going on, and it just shows up out of nowhere, like literally out of nowhere, and smashes their boat. There's no original shark footage in this one, and it's entirely stock footage, which kind of takes away all the thrills, and the ending definitely uses the classic shoot an explosive item near the shark to kill it trope, and even though it's one of the earliest and most obvious clones of Jaws, it's pretty freaking hard to find, so you'd be forgiven if you wanted to skip it. Number 4. So here's an interesting one because it's less of a Jaws ripoff and more Jaws related, and part of me thinks that without Jaws, we wouldn't have seen 12 Days of Terror. This 2004 TV movie, directed by Nightmare 2 director Jack Shoulder, is about a real-life event set back in 1916. You see, off the coast of New Jersey back then, there was a series of shark attacks that were the basis of Benchley's novel. He was so inspired by the real story that he wrote the novel as his version of it, and of course Jaws was born out of that. So now, here's an actual film version of those same events, and it's still pretty familiar, with a beach attack and one solitary man claiming it's a shark while all the bureaucrats find other reasons, although instead of a propeller, they actually suggest a stray torpedo, so yeah. Gimli is here, playing a very Quintish kind of character, and of course the mayor refuses to close the beaches because
tourism.
The irony here is that this was a real series of events, and they really did refuse to close the beaches. So again, if you think things in a movie seem far-fetched, it's probably because you're overestimating human beings. It's kind of slow-moving, but it's pretty interesting watch if you're interested in the way that things really went down in order to create the tropes that we're ridiculously familiar with at this point. I kind of dug it. It had some good bits and some decent effects, except maybe for this shark moving along without any sort of motion, like its tail doesn't move or anything to propel it forward. It just kind of coasts. Number 3. They just don't get more rip-offish than 1981's The Last Shark, also known as Great White. This film is such a ripoff that Universal Pictures actually sued to block the release in the US, and the film was actually pulled from theaters because it was deemed to be too similar. It should come as no surprise that it came from Italy, where all the best movie clones are born, from director Enzo Castellari, who directed The Inglourious Bastards. You know, the movie that Tarantino just stole the title from because he thought it was cool. But hey, he changed the A to an E, because I guess he had to differentiate it from the original.
Hey Quentin, you know what else would have differentiated it? An original title.
Anyway, The Last Shark takes place in a small seaside community, but they have a shark problem that's apparently able to just explode people from underneath. Vic Morrow is here with a familiar kind of look and a familiar kind of boat, and of course the mayor doesn't agree that it's a shark and won't cancel the regatta. Of course, they have the regatta and discount Hulk Hogan here, who's clearly dressed for the occasion, and they even rip off the whole barrel thing with the shark's presence being indicated by a buoy that gets attached to it. The shark then reveals itself in this amazing sequence. And unlike a lot of these films that just use stock footage to make their shark effects, we get a couple of model sharks here that are pretty awesomely hilarious. They do also mix in some stock shots, and of course they're really obvious compared to their fake shark. And then there's this whole helicopter sequence that's probably my favorite bit in the whole movie. They attack the shark in a copter and yet still manage to not just stay in the helicopter and then not keep the copter away from the water. It seems like those would be easy things to do. There's tons of great shots as it draws to a close, as they take every chance they get to show this thing pop up out of the water, because that's like 80% of what it does, is pop up out of the water. This one's tons of fun, and clearly a huge ripoff of Jaws. I mean, this was the film's poster. And it's the only one on this list that was certified to be a knockoff by the courts. Number 2. Another early entry in the runnings was 1979's Up from the Depths, and this is another one that kind of plays with the theme since it's debatably a shark, but it's referred to as a prehistoric shark and a shark-like creature, so we're counting it. Especially since it's a fairly close knockoff, and it is absolutely insane. A bit of backstory for this one, because it was an obsession for a while for me, since I saw it when I was younger, but didn't know the title or anything, just random scenes, and eventually convinced myself that it didn't exist. And then finally, by pure chance, I saw a clip of it on YouTube and was finally able to track it down. It starts with a girl being killed while her male friend can't do anything about it, although he does toss the beer out of his glass and scoop up bloody water, I guess, to determine that it was indeed blood. I mean, he couldn't tell this just from looking. And then with the way he just chills with it, is he gonna drink it? So yeah, there's this resort, and instead of the skeptical mayor, we have Mr. Forbes here, who is sort of a cross between Mr. Furley and Ted from Scrubs. We meet our hero Greg, who has a rather unique way of running away, and the doc here, whose female assistant was killed earlier today, which traumatized him, is now fine a few hours later, laughing at fish.
Fish are pretty funny.
This photographer gets killed while standing waist deep in water with an apparently Jaws-ish theme, and no one sees the creature, so it can't be that terribly big, right? Forbes doesn't want to close the resort, of course, hiding the fact that there was a shark attack, and the cast of characters is amazing.
Have we landed?
I'll be back in a minute. The fish like bubble gum?
And then there's this guy here.
Would I get my subscriber count up if I do that?
And is that Lemmy?
Before you start pissing him moaning, I got a business proposition for you.
The creature finally shows up and creates some havoc, and it's pretty silly even by 1978 standards. And everyone on the island freaks out about the fish running around like crazy, even though they're on land. People are literally setting things on fire and trampling each other because there's a monster fish in the ocean while they're on dry land. Look at these people. What are they running from?
Don't let it get me!
Snap out of it! Fish can't walk!
Everybody's running!
Fish can't run either!
They decide to put a bounty on the shark, so of course these guys, and by guys I mean R. Lee freaking Ermey, get so excited that they start grabbing these spears, which I guess they just had laying around.
I will kill.
Okay, buddy. We believe in you.
From this point on, it's basically a montage of wacky characters trying to kill the thing.
My God! Did you see that?
No, we did not.
When the doc dies,
Please don't throw me in again, fellas. Don't let it get me.
they strap bombs to him and toss him in the water and tow him behind as bait.
You didn't know him, lady. He'd have wanted it like this.
No, he wouldn't. He literally said that he wouldn't right before he died.
This one is really odd and actually a lot of fun. And let's look at this fish again. I mean, it's pretty damn convincing. And just think, this thing was designed by a future Oscar winner. This is created by the same guy that made Gizmo and the Brundlefly. This thing. And number one, probably the biggest ripoff here, is 1995's Cruel Jaws. And yes, it is from Bruno Mattei, whose Shocking Dark was also showed up on my Alien ripoff list. This one starts off by ripping off another ripoff by just reusing footage from The Last Shark. And I should point out that this film was actually marketed in some territories as Jaws 5 Cruel Jaws, putting this one in a league that none of the other films on this list can match. It's got a hopefully less racist Hulk Hogan clone, and let's see. Body is found, and this guy says it's a shark, but because they don't want to hinder the tourist season, they declare it to be a boating accident. People get attacked by an assortment of stock footage, and you know how the opening of Jaws was shot in the daytime, but they put a filter on it to make it look like night, but it's not really that noticeable because it's at sea? Well, this is the opposite of that. Look at those long nighttime shadows. That's perfectly normal, right? Some of the dialogue is lifted verbatim from Jaws.
All this machine does is swim and eat and make little sharks, and that's all.
And all they really know how to do is swim, eat, and make baby sharks.
And they catch a shark that they think is the right one, but
the digestive system of this animal is very, very slow. Let's cut it open. Whatever it's eaten in the last 24 hours is bound to still be in there, and then we'll be sure.
You want to be sure, Mayor? You want to be sure, Mr. Lewis? All you have to do then is open him up and see what's in his stomach.
They ignore all the warnings and of course have the regatta, stealing music and having their race. I mean, they're clearly not moving at all, and they lift more footage from Last Shark, and then the Star Wars theme. There's more stolen footage from Jaws, as well as scenarios like the exploding gas can from Part 2, and every single shark moment in this damn film is either stock footage or stolen footage. Every single one. If you think that this one's gonna make any sense,
Wrong!
this one hits number one on the list because not only does it manage to rip off Jaws, but it actually rips off Jaws ripoffs, and that is a pretty outstanding feat.
And you're staying locked up in here until this is over!
So there you have it, 10 movies that all knock off the masterpiece known as Jaws. And it's a mixed bag, but for the most part, I really enjoyed quite a few of these. These were a lot of fun. I think that I love Jaws so much that the movies knocking it off even have a little higher profile in my mind. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I had a lot of fun with these. I hope you enjoyed some of these knockoffs. I hope it inspires you to go check some of them out. If not, I would understand, but some of these are worth watching. If you've seen them or want to see them or just have any comments on them, please let me know down below. Just leave a comment down there. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, click the little bell, do all those things that everybody normally does. And of course, check out my patrons, because these guys help keep the channel going and help keep these videos getting made, which you can do as well if you go to patreon.com/movietimelines and help support this channel. You can do so for as little as like a buck a video. It's pretty easy. So if you'll do that, I appreciate it. But in the meantime, just keep watching these videos, and I will see you very shortly for another great one. More Jaws knockoffs. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.